Hey everyone, just a quick review on Fuji's XT1. I was sent this camera by Fuji South Africa to just have a look at it. I just want to thank Fuji South Africa and particularly Mandy who managed to source the camera for me. I know there are many other photographers who've wanted to get their hands on it, so I do appreciate the week that I've had with it. I'm not associated with Fuji, I don't get paid by them. I'm just having a look at their camera, plain and simple. I do own Fuji cameras. I currently own the X Pro 1 and a couple of other lenses as well. So yeah, I suppose I really do enjoy the product. So I just wanted to give you an unbiased review of what I think of the XT1 and also try and establish whether it is something that I need in my bag as opposed to want in my bag. I suppose that's the big thing for all of us. It's such a beautiful looking camera. We don't get carried away in thinking that we need it where we want it. We actually need it. So yeah, I own DSLRs, 5D Mark IIIs. I have two of them in my job. I have three bodies, but I use two on the shoots. I'm a wedding portrait photographer and I'm a bit of a sucker for punishment. So I just use primes. I've got the 85-1.2, the 35-1.4, the 135 f2, and then I have one zoom in my bag, which is the 1740, which is on the camera right now. I use that just for your, the versatility on the dance floor. When things are moving and happening very quickly in front of you, you need that wide angle. So, and that's a great lens as well. So I do have very good lenses. Some would say those three are some of the best lenses Canon have ever made, and full frame camera bodies. So how do we bring the XT1 into this camera bag? First off, it's such a beautiful camera. It's very well made. I'd like to just say, probably a sort of a conclusion up front, that if you're looking to get into photography, if you are mad over mirrorless, yeah, I don't think you need to look much further than Fuji. They really make a superb camera. All their cameras have been great. I'll get onto their pros and cons soon, but I think if you're looking for something compact with the highest possible image quality, good support, company support, good amount of lenses and variations of lenses, yeah, I think Fuji must be now at the top. I haven't tried them all. I would take it over a Sony, personally. Not knocking Sony too much, but I think Fuji are a little bit ahead of them, especially when it comes to camera layouts, design, responsiveness. It's been a bit of a wait to try and get these cameras to where we want them, and I think that Fuji is probably leading the pack that way. I haven't tried the Olympus, but I heard great reviews about that. It's just a darn ugly camera, but I suppose we don't choose cameras necessarily for their looks. And it's mainly the performance, so quite possibly the Olympus is up there as well, because I've heard it focuses very well, and yeah, it has a micro four thirds sensor, but besides that I heard it is a good camera, so I can't comment on that. Compared to what I own, this is the big thing. I bought the X Pro 1 when it was almost over 2 years ago now, right at the beginning when it came out. To be honest, I was kind of pulled in on its looks alone. I think that kind of maybe overshadowed my decision. It was meant to go on my belt because I wear a Spider Pro belt and I have the two cameras running with the two primes, and I just swap out lenses, so I've always got a focal length that I need. And I thought that somehow I could bring this onto the one side of my body and keep the DSLR on the other. But the truth is, the performance on the camera is just not up there. It was never going to be up there. I found out very quickly that it's limited in its use in my work field, although it does take an amazing image, I'll give it that. And I think everyone knows the JPEGs that come out of these cameras are far superior to Canon. I mean, if I was to, very occasionally I don't shoot RAW, so if I wasn't shooting RAW, it would be in a situation where someone asked me to hand over images very quickly with minimal editing that need to be displayed on the day of the event or used immediately for press. And in that situation I often shoot JPEG and then do a very basic sort of preset over all the images and then hand over. What I did find though is when I'm doing events like that, the X Pro one does come out because the JPEGs out of the camera don't really need much done to them. They're very, very good. And also because you've got an EVF, you can see what you're getting immediately. So you're quite confident in what you're getting. So yeah, I think that's their strength. Great lenses, great builds. Last night I put the 56, I call it the 35 equivalent focal length, but it's the 56 1.2 lens on the X Pro 1 body, and then I use it on this body, and yeah, then you actually see that there's hype around the autofocus and the accuracy. I don't think it's really up there with the DSLRs, or nowhere close, quite honest, but I think the hype around it is more that it's evolved so much from the previous models. So I think if you had the X100, the XE1 or X Pro 1, this would be a jump up. I do not know the X100S and I do not know the XE2. So if those are similar in autofocus speeds, whether it's necessary to make the change, I don't know. That would be your call. Yeah, I used it for a week, and in this week I had 4 big shoots. So it was a very big week for me, and I took the plunge and I stuck it on my hip and put my 1.5D Mark III body away. That's a big risky thing to do, but just from playing it on the night that I got it, which was the day before the shoot, it did seem to be a little bit more responsive than the previous camera, so I had high hopes. Yeah, it's kind of left me a bit confused. I like it. I think it is, yeah, I think it is a definite step up for Fuji and mirrorless in general. But there are major, well, I call them major in my work. You know, you may not do the work I do. Yeah, you may be an amateur, you may be a hobbyist, you may be a pro and doing a totally different line of work. If you were shooting babies, if you were shooting portraits, even engagement shoots or things where you can control your environment, things are relatively static. If you're into street where you compose and let someone to walk into frame, sort of that's, you know, sort of, I suppose even if you're using manual focus lenses, you know, if you have a little bit more time on your hands and you can create the situation, these cameras are phenomenal. And I think if my work was just based around that, I would have 2 of these on my hip because they're that good. But in my work, I need to cover moving, I need to cover static, I need to cover the whole lot, and this can't do that. Where, in truth, and I'll be honest about this because I have no affiliation with Fuji, besides the few benefits of EVF, which I'll mention now, and the compatibility, or sorry, the portability of the camera, DSLRs can do everything that mirrorless can do. Mirrorless can't do everything a DSLR can do. So, you know, there have been reports out there that the DSLR is still the leader in the market. I'd have to tend to agree with that because it's a more versatile camera. So I sit and hope every day that we do get cameras like these that will fill that need, that will do what a DSLR does, because to carry 2 of these around with 4 or 5 primes would just be, yeah, it would be a huge step for me. It would make my life a lot easier. And yeah, besides that, I think Fuji need to keep their team on, whoever's designing these cameras, pay them bonuses because they're doing such a good job in the way they're thinking out, the way that they put the menu together, the way they've put in extra features where you can now access menus pretty quickly from buttons that you can assign. Having all the dials on the top. Now, I mean, you guys all, I'm sure you're on YouTube, you've done a lot of research as it is, but you can see you've got your ISO, you've got your shutter speed, your compensation all on the top now, you know, so you may need to go into the menu in the beginning of a shoot, but you never really have to go into it again unless something drastic happens in front of you where major changes need to be made. The lenses, yeah, you know, one of the bonuses I like, and, you know, a lot of people say you get obviously we know you get a far shallower depth of field shooting wide open on full frame, but in a way that can be a negative as well, because on my 85 1.2 I very seldom can shoot at 1.2 because it's such a shallow depth of field, especially if you're standing within the meter or 2 of your subject. And a lot of the time you are the lens like this because it's a portrait lens. It's too shallow. I mean, you would get maybe a hit out of 2 or 3 out of 10 if you're taking photographs, where you need to then, you know, stop down, maybe f2, 2.8, and then you start getting the results you want. Where This at the same distance is giving you a slightly larger depth of field, so I think your hit rate is pretty high on a 1.2 lens with a APS-C sensor. Now a lot of people, because you're getting the light capabilities, the wide open aperture, but you're not having to deal with a razor thin depth of field, like an inch of focus, which can be hard because focusing on the eye then puts the nose out of focus and things like that, where you get that less on this. And I think that in a way is a perk. Yeah, I think if you were comparing this to the sort of mid-range DSLRs, APS-C sensor cameras, these things really do well in comparison. I think if you were looking in that market, I would consider something like this, unless you're shooting high-speed sports or something like that. I've heard reviews where they talk about tracking and things like that. Guys, don't get pulled into that. This camera can track to a certain degree, but it's not going to do what your DSLR does. Plain and simple. It will do slight movements, and then if your subject moves into shade, or where there's very little contrast, or whatever the situation may be, that's it. You're not getting that shot. Where DSLR will continue in any environment to keep getting that shot. The one big thing for me, problems I had, yeah, I do love the camera, but there were problems, is that Fuji may need to just in future just look at these. I like the idea the way they brought the it used to be on the X Pro 1 it was a drive button here, which then controlled your single shot, your motor drive, your panoramic view, your overlay of pictures, your bracketing and so on. It's all been set up now below the ISO dial, which is pretty cool. I mean, I think not having to go into a menu to do that even surpasses DSLRs, because DSLR still got to hit a button and then scroll through my menu on the top of my Canon 5D Mark III. So I think that's great, but the only problem is that it gets hit so easily. So if you were to use this, I'd put a piece of tape there, because the majority of the time most people are going to use single shot. And if that's what you do, I would actually somehow secure it down with tape, because it gets knocked. And like if you go into advanced, for example, or you go into image overlay, those buttons are associated with different features when you call up your menu. So for example, if I want to now adjust my auto ISO, which is setting the maximum ISO, the minimum shutter speed, if this has been knocked and I push that button, nothing happens, and I suddenly panic thinking, oh geez, that function's not working on the camera, only to realize that I actually knocked it off single shot. And when you're trying to get a shot quickly, and you're trying to, because now I suddenly moved into a situation where I was finding that my camera was maxing out at 6400 ISO or 3200 ISO, but the shutter speed didn't need to be 1/25th or 1/60th. I then wanted to go quickly into the menu and just adjust it. Now it could be 1/60th, because I was in a situation where 1/60th would be fine. And then suddenly it didn't work because I knocked that. The other one is obviously your relative, your light metering, and that gets knocked probably more than that gets knocked here. I don't know if it's just me. I have big hands, but I don't have massive hands. But that was something that kept being knocked. Now I was getting different readings, and I was saying, well, why in that situation did it do that? And then I realized that it had moved with what I usually use. So just things like that. I like the screen that tilts. I didn't actually use it. I didn't do any dance floor stuff, or I did a Jewish wedding this week, so the horrors, the Israeli dancing. The camera is very seldom on my eye, because there's so much movement, the camera's up in the air. So unfortunately Fuji didn't send me the 14mm, which I don't own, or the 1024, which I don't own. So I wasn't able to get into a situation where I could actually use the camera away from my face and then use that tilt screen, because that's where it would probably come in handy. Even though I don't really need it on the DSLR, I've just learned that I know where I'm shooting. I don't actually have to see it. I actually prefer to look at the subject while my hand's over here, and I find that pretty good. But that might be a definite advantage. At first I knocked this view mode button, which is up here. Okay, which would be similar to what the button would be on the X Pro 1, which is the view mode at the back of the camera. That then controls your eye sensor. So you can turn off the LCD, turn on the EVF separately or together, and then have the eye sensor controlling one or the other. You don't need this. I mean, I know people shoot with these, but to be honest, if you're buying a camera like this with such an amazing EVF, turn this off, you don't need it. Even your playback, if you set it half a second or 1 second, you get a playback in here, which is unbelievable. I mean, it's better than this. If you're going with a client, you could then push view mode and you could actually go through, or you're going showing someone else. But on shoot mode, save battery, turn that off, just use your EVF, and then you can choose whether you want that EVF and eye sensor or not. So yeah, EVF is amazing, everyone talks about it, we know that now. It's huge, it's big, it's clear. This is where the problem comes. I love the X Pro 1 optical viewfinder. Now, when I put this up to my eye now, the EVF looks really poor in comparison to this because of the jump up. So just by using this for a week, I feel that this is just nowhere near where it could be, even though, you know, I enjoy the X Pro 1 to a certain degree, and I use it for certain things. Like if I go out with my family now or do personal stuff, this comes with me all the time. Recently I stuck on my Voigtlander, because I bought this before there wasn't a wide lens available. And yeah, so what I do is normally I just set an aperture of maybe like 5.6 or f8, focus it around 3-4 meters in front of me, and then you have depth of field all the way from sort of a meter or two in front of you to infinity. And just by doing that, and even setting up a trigger on my hot shoe, and then just holding a flash in my hand like this with the receiver, walking around with my kids, I got really amazing stuff where I didn't need the autofocus. So there's been times where this camera's done some amazing work for me, so I don't want to knock it too badly because I own it. I think it's beautiful and the images are great. But when I compare the two, this is a massive step up. But the problem I have in wedding photography is that I use a lot of off-camera flash. Now, a lot of people have a gripe about your 1/80th shutter speed. It's actually marked with your neck, so you know that's your sync speed if you don't have high-speed sync capability. That is not really, you know, between the 200th of a second, 250th. You know, if you're creative, you can kind of get around that. You can then you can move the client into a situation where you don't need flash, and you can increase your shutter speed or whatever it might be. It's not huge for me, but what was that the way I set it up, there's two ways. You can either go auto ISO, 1/80th shutter speed, and then turn your lens all the way to A. Okay, so now all you're using then is your exposure compensation. So set your shot, like on Thursday last week, I had a row of columns. The columns were all in sunlight. There were 10 of them, they were beautiful, there were vines growing on them. And then I moved my bride into the shade line. And this was a situation where I was bringing one bridesmaid in at a time to get a portrait with the bride. I set it up, and the auto ISO and auto aperture and the 1/80th shutter speed was giving me a reading of about f4 2.8, which I was quite happy with. But if you're battling and the lens is automatically going to like 1.2, and that's too shallow for what you need, especially if you're shooting multiple people, you know, just then bump up your ISO manually, okay, and just keep the lens at auto, or keep it on auto and then manually control your aperture, either way you want. But certain configurations then makes the exposure compensation null and void. This configuration makes it you know, makes it work. So what would happen? I line the shot up, the camera exposes for the subject because that's my focal point, focus point, and it blows out the background. Now I've got the off-camera flash set up. Underexpose a shot by 2 shots. The pillars then go into the correct exposure that I want, and the light then on the flash fills the subject, and I've got a great exposure through the whole shot, and it looks amazing. Only problem is I can't see the reaction on my client's face through the EVF. Now an optical viewfinder, and like a DSLR, like the X Pro 1, once I've set up what I want, I can see the reaction, I can get the shot when I want it. I mean, I was shooting blindly there. I didn't know if their eyes were closed, if they were smiling. That's how the difference between where I wanted my subject and the light at the back. So you've got to watch something like that. Like EVF is very cool, it's a new technology, it's all this, all that. You can see your depth of field effect, you can see your exposure, the image plays back in the viewfinder. There's so many pros about it, but when it comes to something like seeing a reaction, like if you've got a backlit subject and you don't want to blow them out to blow out the background, you want to keep that rim light around them, but you know in Lightroom later then you can use the shadow slide or the full light, whatever you want to call it, to bring them out, then you can do it, but the problem is you can't see the reaction on their face because the EVS is so contrasty that it's now, you can see the light behind them, but the face details are gone. As soon as I picked up the DSLR, and put it to my eye in that same scenario, this went straight onto my hip and I couldn't use it for the rest, because the only place at the ceremony last week is that I had the client standing there. The best light was the light behind them because there was no light in their face. From the other angle I was getting half light across their face, and the DSLR, I could see the reactions, I could get exactly what I wanted, knowing that using the exposure compensation over years of experience, I don't actually have to look at my LCD. So guys who use DSLRs every day, that will irritate them. They'll battle with that, because as fun as it is to have this, it's not an optical viewfinder. It's not seeing exactly that moment, and that's what a lot of photography is about. So guys like using this for street and stuff like that. You know, if they could make DSLRs this size, but they can't because of the mechanisms involved, you know, that would probably be the camera. So the only real way, I suppose, is that they keep improving on this technology. And I don't want to knock Fuji, because what they've made here is probably way more superior to what I can even, you know, I'm just knocking it, but I'm just trying to give you feedback. So if you're in the same line of work as me, or you do similar work to me, that is a problem. It's not easy to overcome. It's very frustrating. But at the same time, Fuji have made a camera that, you know, set itself apart from other cameras and is doing very well, and it's amazing quality. So it's this hard thing. You know, I actually want Fuji to do well. I really do. I don't have any gripe against them like Canon and stuff. You know, they don't really care about me or care about other customers. They're huge. They sell a lot of cameras. Where Fuji, you know, they get people and they listen and they're trying. And I think they got a great team of designers or engineers or whatever you want to call them. And I really hope that they do well. I really do. Yeah. So another weakness, you've got to improve on your flashes, Fuji. You've got to give us better flashes than what you have. Will I buy one of these? Because that's ultimately what my decision will be. You know, I really enjoy the camera. It's a great camera. Whether it fits into my workload, I still don't think so. Like, why would I take it with when a DSLR can do everything I need at my job, besides the weight issue? But it is superior to the X Pro 1. So what I may be hoping for is that they do bring out an X Pro 2. Something where I just hope they don't get rid of that technology with this hybrid viewfinder, because I think combining this now with the hybrid would be a fantastic camera, and keep improving on autofocus accuracy and speed, because it doesn't matter what you say, unfortunately it's probably the best alongside, I think, Olympus. I don't know, I haven't used it for autofocus accuracy and speed, maybe just behind them, I don't know, but compared to Sony and others, I mean, you're still getting the best of mirrorless in this camera. But yeah, I think people running around saying that this is going to be the death to a DSLR either don't work with DSLRs in all lines of, you know, I mean, you couldn't take this to a sporting event in comparison to the guy next to you with the DSLR. You know, as much as skills and, you know, like ability to take a photo is involved, you know, your gear has to work for you. It has to be functional gear. So yeah, that's pretty much my little review. So a bit of love and a bit of not so much love, but I think overall, yeah, I'm impressed. This grip is pretty cool. The grip fits on nicely. It doesn't have that piece like on other cameras which goes into the battery pack, so the battery remains in that camera. And what's great, it's set up that battery is not the one that's used, it's the one in the grip. So as soon as this one runs out, the camera still works because it runs off that one, and then you have time then to replace that one, which is a good way of working it. I think most other grips are similar, but in the past I've had grips where, you know, you just have no idea which one's going and which one's not, and it tells you actually on your screen. You've got two batteries there and it shows you the one going and the one not. So it's, you know, they thought out of a lot of things on this camera. They really put a lot of effort into it, and yeah, I'm impressed. Very impressed. The 56 1.2 is a great lens, not that fast at focusing. I found that the actual my 35 1.4 is slightly quicker. Actually, I don't know if it's just because of the size of the lens. I don't know all the technology and how it works exactly, but it wasn't hugely fast, but it was slightly quicker than the 56. And then obviously the 14, which I didn't get to try, apparently is a lot quicker, but that makes sense because even in DSLRs, your wide-angle lenses are generally more forgiving with focus and quicker because of the angle and the depth of field that's involved. You know, even if you miss your subject on a wide angle, and you're a meter behind your subject, if you're shooting with a decent aperture, you know, your depth of field, you might not even notice that your subject's not in 100% focus, where when you're shooting 1.2 with a portrait lens, you're going to notice it, and it's vital that you get your focus. So yeah, thanks again for Fuji sending me this. You know, I think you guys have made a beautiful camera. Yeah, thanks guys, take care.